Hey there, good evening. This is Heather Van Wild with Raindrop Works. I was not anticipating having a video tonight, but I ended up having a bit of a document drop that was actually pretty significant, I think, in light of what's coming up tomorrow. Hey there, Rev, thanks for joining in on this, even though I know you haven't been really following this case. But yeah, those who have been following me would know that tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, Alan Swinney has his sentencing for assault actions that happened back in August of 2020. And there was documentation filed with the court that I half expected to come in today, but I wasn't sure if I would be able to see it beforehand. It is the sentencing recommendations from the state in these charges, and I wanted to take a few minutes to go through it, as well as try to give a little bit of background on my understanding of how Oregon sentencing guidelines work. There's a few things that we run across with this, a combination of Measure 11 as well as this monstrosity of a sentencing guidelines grid. Basically, to try to normalize sentencing to help remove some of the disparity in different sentences and stuff, they will look at the severity of a particular crime compared with a person's past criminal record and use that to determine what kind of sentence is appropriate for a particular crime. As we can see here, there are different colors on the grid, which matches up with the numbers. These purple down here at the bottom, they're short sentences. Basically, 1 to 3 month sentences is the basic for something that actually ends up in an incarceration. Then you have this lower mid-level, 2 to 4 months in blue here. You've got this purple section, 3 to 6 months. And then the white and yellow is where you start getting into the longer sentences, where it's actually months. And we're going to refer back to this as we go, because the paperwork from DA Vasquez does touch on the sentencing guidelines. Before I go into that, though, I do want to really quick, the history is something that's going to play a key in this later, where the state looks at, using administrative rules, they look at whatever criminal history a person may have had in the past to help determine their history and any kind of sentencing. I don't know if enhancements is the right word, but it's the closest one that I can think of that might apply to this. In this case, they are going to reference at one point a H grade, which is, here it says, a criminal history includes no adult felony convictions or juvenile adjudication for a person felony, no more than 2 juvenile adjudications, no more than 3 adult convictions for Class A misdemeanors. Now, at this time, the only criminal history that I know of that Mr. Swinney had prior to August 2020 was a single DUI case from Texas a number of years ago. So if that was a misdemeanor, Class A is the highest misdemeanor before you have a felony. So if so, that makes perfect sense. He did have a record, but it wasn't, so it didn't qualify for an I, but it was enough for an H. So, going into the document itself here, that the state filed with the court, this was actually, just this afternoon, actually. So we have Nathan Vasquez and Reed Schweitzer, who were the 2 attorneys that were presenting the case for the state in the actual trial itself, asking the court to consider this memorandum regarding the state's position on the sentencing of Alan Swinney. The state of Oregon moves this court to impose consecutive sentences totaling 130 months of prison, of which 70 months will be subject to one charge and 60 months subject to another. We take into account the year that he spent in pretrial confinement. As you'll see, I'll go through the actual numbers later, but they're requesting a sentence that will put him in jail until about 2031. So they start off stating that Oregon sentencing guidelines provide that a sentencing judge may impose sentences consecutively. In this case, the crimes committed by the defendant occurred during 2 separate criminal episodes, involved multiple victims, and evidence of willingness to commit multiple additional offenses. And as we'll see when we go in, basically the charges that have the highest sentence here, one took place August 15th, 2020, and the other took place August 22nd, 2020. So while they were tried at the same time, they were 2 different events that took place at 2 different days. But they still had the same basic premise to them. The state requests defendant be sentenced consecutively on count 5, which was assault 2, which was the shooting of Jason Britton in the head with the paintball, and count 8, unlawful use of a weapon with a firearm, which would be when he pulled the pistol on the crowd on the 22nd. Heather in the chat, I see, did you see the OPB article about the letter he wrote to Chauvin? I have not looked at the actual article, so if the letter was released in that article, I have not seen it. But I did know, yeah, Melissa, the OPB article just came out recently. Yeah, if you check like on OPB's Twitter, I know it's there because it was pointed out to me, which was what reminded me to go look for this filing. We had known that the state knew about the letter to Chauvin because they were originally trying to get it applied to, or get it admitted as evidence for the trial. Basically, this was after Derek Chauvin had been charged, but before he was sentenced. And he was, expressing support for what Chauvin did, and claimed that, basically like the cabal was going to come after both of them for doing what they felt was right. But like a number of his other social media posts and writings and such that Mr. Swinney had done, the court ruled they weren't admissible as evidence, which, we saw something similar in the Kyle Rittenhouse case recently, where statements that he made on social media and such about wanting to shoot people couldn't be used as evidence of why he shot people later. It's not something that I really get, but the best that I can understand is it's giving defendants the latitude for freedom of speech, because words don't necessarily imply action, unless you say, I'm going to go to this place and I'm going to shoot this person. If you're not making those specifics, they tend to want to give you more latitude. Yeah, Melissa's saying, in the letter, Swinney expresses sympathy for Chauvin after his conviction, telling him to keep his head up because he could win on appeal or be freed through other means. Okay, so this was a letter that would have been sent after Alan was in jail, because that's when the conviction happened. Another thing that may end up working in your favor is that this country is headed towards civil war. Swinney wrote, I see it ramping up. Civil war will get you out of jail. It'll get me out too. Swinney told Chauvin they are connected because the protests sparked by Floyd's murder are what drew Swinney from Texas to Portland to, quote, deal with Antifa and burn, loot, murder protesters. A play on BLM. Oh. And yeah, I think the freed through other means, if they're not talking about the like a jailbreak through this civil war that these far right extremists and accelerationists are looking for, then it may be, hoping for sympathetic government officials to look at a pardon. Um, in Derek Chauvin's case and in Mr. Swinney's case, looking at like a pardon from, say, if Donald Trump was to become president again, which is what they would probably want, the U.S. president um, can't pardon for state crimes. The state governor has to be the one to do that. And I know in Mr. Swinney's case, none of these are federal charges. I don't believe any were in Chauvin's case. Yeah, in closing, Swinney told Chauvin, quote, "Our country has too many George Floyds in it." Is that too many black people? Is that too many people with substance abuse issues? Is that too many people accused of potentially passing a counterfeit $20 bill? So many dog whistles, so little time. Quote, "It's time to clean house. I don't believe you meant to kill the guy. The world's a little bit better and safer place without him in it. He was a POS. Thank you for your service." While this letter does not come into the filing that DA Vasquez filed today, this does give a very clear indication of Mr. Swinney's state of mind that is going to be referenced. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure. I felt like there might have been a federal case. I know there's been questions of other things that could be forcing an appeal in the state case, but yeah, my focus has been more on the local stuff because I only have so much bandwidth I can deal with. So yeah, as the DA goes on with this, they confirm the evidence presented to the jury here in Mr. Swinney's case clearly indicated the crimes committed by the defendant occurred during two separate criminal episodes, August 15th and August 22nd. Finally, the evidence demonstrated the defendant's willingness to commit multiple additional offenses and constitute qualitatively different injury to the various victims. The conviction on count 5 requires a 70-month prison sentence per statute because that particular case is a Measure 11 case. There's been a lot of questioning about Measure 11. It all it seems to have done is put more people in jail for longer times and may not be the crime deterrent that it was originally intended for. Okay, so sentencing, it should bring some comfort to the family to know the federal case was going to happen. Yeah, I'm not fully sure what that's supposed to mean, but I think if we know that story's not done, there's definitely going to be more. Okay, so DA Vasquez goes in. There is exceptions in Measure 11 to allow for what they call a downward departure, which is a lesser sentence, if certain circumstances meet, which I postulated back when the conviction came out that they would not qualify for a downward departure in this case, and the DA agrees with that. It says the statutory construction requires the court to find mitigating factors that are substantial and compelling to allow the court to depart from mandatory sentence. Additionally, they must find that the victim did not suffer a, quote, substantial injury. For the reasons outlined below in the rationale section, the defendant, his statements, and the facts of the case provide only aggravating factors which weigh heavily against such a departure. Aggravating factors, yeah. So he's making it even more difficult to try to get mitigating circumstances, because of his actions and his saying, "Oh no, you're fine. I know. Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff going on with the Chauvin trial, which it's a crux for all of this because that action was what set off. Like Mr. Swinney said, those actions set off the protests that convinced him to come out here and then commit his own crimes. So it's definitely it's not fully on topic, but it is definitely relevance. So then the state goes on to confirm, further the eye injury suffered by the victim, this is Jason Britton, constituted a substantial injury, and thus the defendant is not eligible for a downward departure. The evidence at trial clearly indicated the victim suffering a long-lasting injury to his eye. His injury was still present at the time of the trial, approximately a year after the assault. Yes, lots of court, too much court. This injury is better described as a serious physical injury as defined by statute and clearly constitutes a substantial injury. And here's where we start looking to that guidelines grid that I mentioned before. This defendant comes to this court for sentencing with a limited criminal conviction record and would start as an I on the sentencing grid. Which, okay, they actually would start him off as an I, so the record that he has is that minor that he would start at the bottom. While the multiple victims and 2 separate criminal episodes would allow for the court to move the defendant's criminal history score to an A, which would be going from the very bottom to the very top. Oh, yes, Dante Wright. Oh. So many shootings. Yeah, I have not been able to keep up on it all, and that's incredibly frustrating. So yeah, the state is basically saying that they don't see a reason to move the defendant's criminal history score to the A because the mandatory minimum sentence is going to kind of override that anyway. And sentence charges an A, and it's like an A11, that's minor, and that's, if it's not felonies, that's life in prison, that's, 20 years roughly. That single charge is what you can look at with a life penalty. It's 6 months jail in prison. That's up to 7-6. Let's look at them really quick. This is consecutive. 6 concurrent, it's running at the same time as concurrent. And 4 charges are listed to run concurrent with 5 and 6. Anybody has had better resolution and cutting issues? Really? Does anybody know? Oh God, no. No, that is horrible. What the? Okay, I am so sorry about that. Everyone, I don't know what happened with the audio. I'm going to have to. I just switched microphones. I'm going to have to look into that later. Which also explains why my avatar is going crazy. Yeah, I'm still trying to really quick. Oh wait, now I need filters. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my audio tonight. That's something that is hard for me to test. Or like to hear myself. I'm really sorry about that. Okay, so circling back just a minute here. I was getting ready to explain the difference between concurrent and consecutive sentencing. And the simple of it is concurrent being sentencing where it runs at the same time as something else, whereas consecutive is one sentence finishes, then the second one starts. And as you'll see, most of these are going to be concurrent, and a lot of these are actually already served. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and throw up the calculations I did. So we start with the attempted assault 4. The state wants 6 months. He's already been in jail for over a year. So, that's already done. Unlawful use of mace 2. Also 6 months concurrent. That's already done. Attempted assault 3. They're using, for this, grid block 7I, which would be 2 years of probation with 30 days of jail. The 30 days of jail has already been done. The 2 years of probation, I'm not sure how that would work with everything else, but that's something the judge would sort out anyway. Unlawful use of a weapon, 30 days jail, 2 years probation. That's already done. Assault 2. Defendant sentencing grid block would be 9I. So we're looking at... Yep, so this is... Yeah, if it wasn't a Measure 11 charge, his sentencing would be looking at around 3 years. But it's Measure 11, which has a higher mandatory time there. 70 months in prison, 36 months of post-prison supervision. So we're already looking there. That particular charge, if he gets the full amount and he's not eligible for any kind of parole or credits, that sentence doesn't end until August 2026. Count 6 of assault 2, this was him shooting Meg Stewart with the paintball gun. He was found not guilty on that because they couldn't prove that it was his paintball gun that shot her. Unlawful use of a weapon, 2 years probation, 30 days jail. That's already done. Unlawful use of a weapon with firearm. This is also the other large charge that we're talking about. And this one here is 60 months prison consecutive to count 5. Can the judge give a longer sentence than what's on the grid? Theoretically, yes. I don't entirely know what the circumstances are that would be used for what would be an upward departure in that case. And I think if the judge tried to do that, the defense would throw a huge fit about that. But given what comes in the end of this, I won't say that it's impossible. The state does state with a 60-month prison sentence, there would be no post-prison supervision for this count. So we don't have to worry about any kind of probation on that. Count 9, menacing, 6 months jail. That's already done. He's been in for 14, 15 months now. Pointing a firearm at another, 6 months jail. Maximum fine of $500. Unlawful use of mace 2, 6 months jail. That's already done. Assault 4, 6 months jail. That's already done. So the second large charge, the 60-month prison sentence, would look at, after everything is all said and done, if he serves this recommended sentence and serves the full sentence without any kind of parole or early release, August of 2031. Almost another 10 years in state jail for this. The state then goes on to explain why they think this is so significant, or why this is warranted. And as much as I prefer to see rehabilitation over just straight incarceration, I have to say they make a compelling argument. And yeah, this is where the letter to Chauvin would factor in, and it may be brought up to the judge. The state's recommending 130 months prison because the defendant represents a future danger to this community and due to the gravity of his crimes. As evidenced by the defendant's escalating violence, letters, social media statements, and testimony, the defendant has no remorse for his actions, no desire to change, and every intention of engaging in future acts of violence. So, yeah, him taking the stand to defend himself may have actually made things more difficult. The defendant takes great pride in his actions and has a complete inability to recognize the criminality of his conduct. And this is something even earlier this week I had a glimpse of. Tuesday, I sat in an observation room for what we thought was going to be a civil trial with the second victim, Meg McLean, suing him for the injuries that he caused to her. Now, they settled for a nominal amount. It was a settlement that there's a judgment of $250,000, but they're not going to pursue that, so there's not actually any money that he is being required to pay to her. And that includes he doesn't have to pay for any filing fees or legal fees or anything like that. But the way that he spoke, that I was hearing him on the microphone, I definitely had an impression that he saw this as an absolute win for him. That he thinks he didn't do anything inappropriate. So the state does say the only option to mitigate the potential risk that the defendant possesses to this community is substantial incarceration. The future dangerousness of the defendant is most apparent due to the fact that the defendant actively seeks conflict. He wants to find conflict to help create and engage in what he believes is an ongoing civil war. His intentions were made clear by the evidence in this case. His testimony at trial, his actions on August 15th and August 22nd, and Attachment A, which I don't believe I have seen, but this might actually be the letter that we're talking about. The defendant traveled to the city of Portland for the express purpose of, quote, dealing with Antifa. In the defendant's social media post presented at trial, the defendant actively attempted to recruit people to form an armed militia. His express goal was to have this group fight in his ongoing civil war. On August 15th, the defendant led a small group of like-minded individuals and engaged in multiple acts of violence. Yes, the sentencing will be live streamed. I've confirmed all the details with the court earlier today. I'm planning to start up my stream about 8:30 to make sure I can talk to people and sort out any details. But court is scheduled to start at 9 o'clock, so probably sometime between 9 and 9:30 they'll actually be up and going. But we do have permission to live stream it, and I've already got everything pretty much ready for that. In addition to the defendant's act of violence on August 15th, an associate of the defendant fired a handgun from a moving car in the direction of a group of people after engaging in acts of violence with the defendant. See State v. Schuyler, Jernigan, 20 CR 45800, convicted of 2 counts of unlawful use of a weapon with a firearm. There was a lot of discussion over referencing this case in Mr. Swinney's trial, but they decided against it, and I don't remember if it was the judge who said that or if the state agreed not to. And this was a case where the claim was that left-wing protesters were swarming a car that was trying to get out of a parking garage, and shots were fired from inside the car to disperse the crowd, and charges were brought. Schuyler Jernigan did plead guilty on those. I think he got a prison term, but I don't remember right now what it was. I can remember to look in a few minutes after I get done with this. So that was all just on the 15th. That violence, which injured several people and seriously injured victim Jason Britton, only emboldened the defendant and motivated him to escalate his violence. The events of August 22nd highlight the extreme danger the defendant represents to this community. The defendant promoted that event and acted as a leader within the riot that occurred. The videos presented during the trial detail countless assaults, including multiple assaults that the defendant either directly participated in or encouraged others to engage in. On that date, the defendant prepared to engage in a mass shooting when he pulled out his handgun and pointed it at a crowd of people. Through all of this, the defendant had no ability to see how or why his actions were wrong. During the trial, he quickly labeled all of the people that opposed him as terrorists. He expressed joy for those that were hurt, bragged about his actions, and strongly asserted that he would do it all over again if given the chance. And then this references a pre-sentencing investigation, which I have not seen. It might be a sealed record. Okay, Christine in the chat saying that Schuyler just got probation. That was my thought, but I wasn't entirely sure. The defendant represents both a catalyst and a lightning rod for political violence. Lightning rod was a definite choice of words there. It was a phrase that D.A. Vasquez used early on in the case for reasoning on why bail should not be reduced, about the risk that he was to the community, and if he had access to his social media. And the judge at the time, I believe that one was Judge Silver, really did not like the use of the term lightning rod, especially at that junction. But I think now that the conviction has happened and everybody has seen exactly what we're talking about, it does feel appropriate. This violence continues to occur in our community, and the defendant wants to promote, organize, and engage in this violence. And again, I think this loops back to that letter to Chauvin. The defendant's grandiose actions and callous crimes warrants a sentence of 130 months in prison. The defendant's desire to organize violent, hate-filled militia groups, his desire to create riots in the Portland metro area, and his desire to engage in violent conflicts represent an extreme danger to this community. That danger, when combined with his pro-criminal attitudes, the injuries he inflicted, and the nature of his crimes, warrant a sentence of 130 months. State respectfully requests that much time for the defendant, Alan Swinney. Mike Schmidt by DA Nathan Vasquez, and then was sent on to Mr. Westover and Ms. Desai are still attached to this case. There was question if Mr. Westover, because he was leaving Multnomah Defenders right at the end of this case, if he was going to be able to continue representing it. It looks like he did. Okay. When I first looked through, I had not gone down close. I had not gone down far enough. So yeah, they do. Obviously, they reference the Chauvin letter. I'm gonna go ahead and read the letter. I will just preface, because this is a cold read. I don't know, what kind of trigger warning might be appropriate with this. So I'm just going to say that right up front, and apologies in advance. Hey, Derek, I'm sorry, brother. I was really hoping they wouldn't get you on all charges, but keep your head up. You still have a couple of ways out of this. You and I are connected in a way. The riots that sparked up after are part of the reason I'm in jail right now. I'm from Texas, but I went to Portland to deal with Antifa and burn, loot, murder protesters. We had a flag wave in front of Central Precinct on the sidewalk, and the same group of protesters that came out to attack the police every night for months straight showed up to attack us. We fought back, though, and because we defended ourselves, I'm sitting in jail for going on 8 months now. So this would have been around June. I was marking the protesters who were attacking us with paintballs, and they are bringing charges on me for shooting my attackers with paintballs. Go figure. You admit to shooting people with paintballs, yeah, they're going to charge you for shooting people with paintballs. You will have an appeal, and if they change the venue, you won't get all the charges, I bet. Another thing that you may end up working in your favor is that this country is headed toward civil war. I've been fighting with the left for years now. I've been to rallies from coast to coast, and I've got 96 Antifa and BLM agitators arrested. Those are claims that we've seen on his Parler account in the past, too. I've been fighting this civil war for a while now. I see it ramping up. Civil war will get you out of jail. It'll get me out, too. Our country has too many George Floyds in it. It's time to clean house. I don't believe you meant to kill the guy, but the thing is, the world a little bit better and safer place without him in it. He was a POS. Thank you for your service. I'm sorry this happened to you, but like I said, a civil war will get you out of there. I don't think it'll be long now. If you need a friend, write me. I'm a vet, proud boy, and a patriot. Drive on, I can't quite read that word. Chin up, you got this. I do think it's there's a hint of irony that he says he's a proud boy, because in the weeks before this happened, he publicly stated that he was rescinding his membership in the Proud Boys because of issues he had with the management, and it seemed, at least to me, like it was because for a white chauvinist organization, they had a non-white person as the mouthpiece. Oh, okay, yes, thank you. Drive on, soldier, chin up, you got this. calling a cop a soldier. Yeah, that's... my avatar can't do eye rolls, so I have to settle for head rolls. So attachment B is a really grainy photo of him pointing the firearm at the crowd, which was kind of a world-famous picture of him. And yeah, that's the end of that document. So yeah, that's... I guess this is why the OPB wrote the article that they did. They probably saw the same document and then saw the letter, which, you know, it's been talked about, but I think this is the first time we've actually seen it. Yeah, so I'm just really quick taking a look. If they treated these charges as A class instead of the I class they originally were, the mandatory minimum for his assault charge, 70 months they're looking at, and a 9A would have been 66 to 72 months anyway, so that doesn't seem any different. Count 8 was the other one. And it doesn't give a grid. I had a different version of this guidelines grid that actually helped to break down which violations were which crime severity. It's, if you're not steeped in the lore of Oregon court procedures, it can get confusing very quickly. It's basically committed to traveling around the country trying to provoke a civil war. I mean, beyond that, he admitted, you know, even before he was arrested, that he's been doing this. And in his mind, it's been a civil war, just he's been on the forefront of it. Yeah, it's... I would not be surprised at all if he is seeing himself like so many of the January 6th insurrectionists that are currently in federal custody, where they are literally seeing themselves as prisoners of war or political prisoners. Because, you know, they start fights with the government and then act all shocked when the government tries to hold them accountable. Obviously, you know, those of us who are looking at this from a justice perspective and say that, you know, mass incarceration is not the answer, and this is a discussion I've had with somebody else already tonight when I first got a chance to glance at this, is I've personally felt this whole time that, while, yeah, the system that we have is definitely broken, whatever replaces it, we need a method of seclusion for those who are unable or unwilling to be rehabilitated to be safe in the community. Usually I use Jeremy Christian as the example for locally because, you know, he murdered several people in the Max train. At his sentencing, he yelled out at a victim that he wished he had killed her too. That was, you know, a person who had absolutely no remorse for any of his actions and wanted to do more. By all accounts, what I've seen of Mr. Swinney, he's, you know, while his crimes may not have been as severe, he's kind of in the same boat, and for some very similar reasons, it appears. Jeremy Christian was definitely, race oriented. Maybe different race, because his actions were more directed towards Muslim type ancestry, whereas Mr. Swinney seems to be more towards the black community. But yeah, I think there's definitely going to be some stuff coming up in the coming months over this. And like I said on the Twitter thread before, for tomorrow at least, the courts are setting up the same thing that they did during the trial. They have two different observation rooms. One is going to be dedicated for those who are there to support Mr. Swinney. The other one is there for those who are supporting the victims in this case. So they're on different floors and everything. So they're trying to keep everyone separated. We have the live stream available from the court. I'll also be doing the live stream here, so that we've got as many ways for people to view as they feel comfortable. But I suspect there is definitely going to be people who will not be happy with whatever happens tomorrow. Yeah, it's all demoralizing. While things are dying down a bit due to Trump being out, there are more people recruiting to this mindset. Yeah, Steve Bannon calling for a shock troop. Yeah, him and Matt Gaetz. I haven't seen the clip, but I saw the text summary, basically, where Steve Bannon runs a podcast and he had Matt Gaetz on, or other way around. But they're talking about trying to have like 4,000 or 6,000 quote shock troops ready to go if Trump was to win the presidency in 2024, to basically go in and push out all the people in high levels of government and essentially try to take over the government with people that are sympathetic to their ideologies. All this, of course, while Bannon is fighting against contempt of Congress charges. Oh, hey, hi Meg. Yeah, we've been talking about you briefly. Okay, so during the civil trials, you said you thought Trump and Biden work for the same people. That is not an unusual claim in these groups, and even on the outside of it, the two parties, they do tend to serve the same interests, and it's usually not us. Yeah, there's a lot from this week that I haven't been able to follow up on yet, because I haven't, with everything going on, I haven't been able to request the audio from this week. Yeah, that is my guess, but I know you were asking Meg about it being a New World Order type conspiracy. I mean, I tend to think it's more of just oligarchs. They serve the ones who have all the money, and we don't have money. Yes, Rev just made a good point there. Florida Governor Desantis is looking to restart the state guard, kind of like a state national guard, except it has no federal funding and no federal oversight. Part of that seems to be a way to try to get around the COVID mandates. I have had to point out to some people that what Florida is doing is not entirely unheard of. There is, not even counting Florida, there's like 22 states plus Puerto Rico that have their own non-federal state guard type program. Oregon is one of them. From my understanding, usually what their job is more along the lines of, if the National Guard is deployed, like on a federal program, the state guard steps up and maintains the National Guard facilities to keep them safe and everything. So I think that the state guard itself is not inherently authoritarian, but I can see where Governor Desantis's move at this time and his rhetoric could definitely make his an exception to that. Um, you know, I'm really not sure. Give me a second here. Let me get us a. Oh, you're okay, Meg. I know you won't see this for a few minutes. We're all just kind of chatting up now at this point here. Um. Well, the first link DuckDuckGo has for Puerto Rico National Guard is the Army National Guard, which is just a state-branded version of the federal Army National Guard site. So, yeah, 1-800-GO-GUARD. That's the Army National Guard number that they've used ever since I was in the military, 20 years ago. Let's see. Oh, I don't know why I searched Tennessee. Oops. Oh, shoot, State Defense Force. It's right here. Yeah, Meg saying, I won't be at sentencing because I don't want to, which I completely understand. Wrote a statement basically ending, tell your supporters to leave us alone and I will request 0 jail time. He won't do it. And yeah, not only will he probably not do it, but when we look at the specific charges, the macing that he did against you specifically, that he was convicted of in the criminal case, that was a 6-month sentence, which he's already served out in his pretrial. See if that gets it. So yeah, all these states here. Okay, the highlighter's not working. All these states here, from Alaska all the way down to Washington on this list, they all have active state guards. And Washington's on here, Oregon's on here, Louisiana, Maryland, New York. It's a real who's who there. I made the joke before. It's the Southwest, the South, the Pacific Northwest South, and the OG militia, because we do have Connecticut and New York is kind of Revolutionary War, Rhode Island. Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Meg for a little while after her civil case, and this is definitely the closing of a chapter. Um, there are still two more civil cases. One of them is with Jason Britton. I don't know where he has left the state. I'm not sure quite what the plan is going to be with that yet. Then there is also a larger case of a few people that are suing Mr. Swinney as well as a few other people. Both of those cases had stays put on them because of the ongoing criminal trials. Basically, there is an issue where in civil trials you don't have a Fifth Amendment right to avoid self-incrimination. So if you testify at a civil trial, you have to answer the questions, but then what you answer could be used against you in a criminal trial. So they held over the civil trials until after the criminal trial. Yeah, and I know you you talked about all this with on Twitter or was it? Yeah, it was last night, and I really appreciated you being able to join in that conversation, Meg. It was, yeah, I didn't want to pull you into it, but I will say, for what it's worth, you look pretty rocking with the eye patch. I didn't want to say it then, but you made it. You wore it very well. Wonder if I can pull this off. Probably not, because red on red. No, I can't do the emote. I was trying to do a hard emote, but my green screen won't let me. So, yeah, that's basically where we're looking at for going into tomorrow. Apparently, I need to sit down with some of my gear and figure out what the heck is going on. Because I do not like the idea of going aquarium in the middle of this tomorrow. I might just end up setting up 3 different microphones or something. We'll see. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and I think shut down the stream for the time being, and I'll be back here again in about 12 hours. Take care. Have a good night. Those of you that I see tomorrow, I'll see you tomorrow. If not, have a good weekend and good holidays. Bye.